In 1797, a little-known British officer, Horatio Nelson, was at the right place at the right time at the Battle of Cape St. Vincent. His actions there formed the foundation for his legendary career. This is the story of one of history's greatest admirals. Before we continue with the rest of the video, let's have a look at the tactics and ships used in battles during the Age of Sail. Battleships had come a long way since King Henry VIII, but little had changed in their design throughout the 1700s. The ships used by navies throughout Europe only differed slightly. Ships were given a rating according to their size. On the left is an example of a third rate with 74 cannons. These ships usually had between 64 and 80 cannons, but virtually all navies settled on the 74-gun version as the best compromise between firepower and maneuverability, and these ships made up the bulk of European navies. Any ship smaller than a third rate usually didn't take part in set-piece battles, but rather acted in a supporting or scouting role. The ship in the middle is classified as a second rate, and these ships had anywhere between 84 and 98 cannons. The main difference between them and a third rate was that a second rate had 3 full gun decks, whereas a third rate only had 2. These ships were less maneuverable than a third rate as a result of their size, but made up for it with more firepower. Only the British extensively used this type of ship. Finally, we have the first rate on the right. These were the biggest ships utilized by navies and had more than 100 cannon. They were slow but powerful and often acted as an admiral's flagship. They were very expensive to build and maintain though, so navies only had a few of these, if any at all. The Spanish in particular built massive ships. The Santísima Trinidad had 140 cannons on 4 full gun decks, and was the largest ship afloat at the time. When a ship fired all of its cannons on one side, it was known as a broadside. The British crews were vastly superior to their French and Spanish counterparts, reliably firing at twice the rate of their opponents. There are even accounts of the British firing 6 broadsides to their opponent's 1 in the same space of time. Usually, battles would consist of 2 opposing lines passing each other whilst firing broadsides. This is where the term ship of the line comes from. The last thing to look at are the various doctrines of the navies at the time. The Spanish and French favored long-distance conventional battles, and accordingly built massive ships for these engagements. The British approach favored speed and maneuverability. They wanted to get up close and personal with the enemy and overwhelm portions of the enemy fleet with superior gunfire and tactics. A great example of this is the Battle of the Nile, fought 1 year after Cape St. Vincent. With that out of the way, let's jump to the battle. In 1796, Spain and France signed the Treaty of Ildefonso, bringing Spain into the war with the First Coalition on the side of France. Spain was now at war with Britain. In response, Britain blockaded Spain and cut the sea lines of communication between Spain and her overseas empire. Britain was now in a dangerous situation. Throughout the 1600s and 1700s, the 4 great naval powers of the world were Britain, Holland, France, and Spain. With Holland under French control and Spain having entered the war, the British Navy was now outnumbered on all fronts. Sir John Jervis, commander of the British Mediterranean Fleet, had to withdraw as he was now up against 38 ships of the line, while only having 15. Jervis withdrew and set up his headquarters in the mouth of the Tagus River in Portugal. A large Spanish fleet, consisting of 27 ships of the line, was stationed at Cartagena. They were under the command of Admiral José de Córdoba. On the 1st of February 1797, the fleet left Cartagena and was sailing to Cadiz as an escort for a merchant fleet. At the same time, Commodore Horatio Nelson was returning to the Atlantic on HMS Minerve, one of the last British ships to leave the Mediterranean. On the 11th of February, Nelson sailed right through the slower-moving Spanish fleet, something that was only possible because of heavy fog. Nelson joined Jervis's squadron, which was now much closer to Spain, 2 days later and informed him of the Spanish fleet. Nelson did not know the true size of the Spanish fleet, so thinking that it was a much smaller squadron, the British moved to intercept it. Nelson returned to his own ship, the third-rate HMS Captain. The Spanish had to sail further into the Atlantic as a result of strong winds, but were now sailing for Cadiz. That evening, the British heard the signal guns of the Spanish ships, and early the next morning a Portuguese ship reported that the Spanish fleet was 24 kilometers away, and a few hours later the first Spanish ships were sighted. The British would have their battle. The British fleet approached from the north in two lines. Admiral Jervis was on HMS Victory, which was the second last ship in the left column, and Nelson was on HMS Captain, third last on the right. Further south, the Spanish fleet was sailing slightly north of eastwards, heading to Cadiz. As the Spanish were not expecting a battle, they were sailing in two loose groups, of 18 and 7 battleships respectively. Almost all of the larger Spanish ships were in the main group, which was a bit further behind the smaller group. There were another 2 Spanish ships who were sailing some distance behind the main division, bringing the total to 27. The position shown is approximately the same as what it would have been at 6 in the morning. At 5 minutes past 6, Jervis signalled the rest of the fleet, saying, "A victory to England is very essential at this moment." This was indeed the case, as the Royal Navy was effectively outnumbered everywhere. At 6:30, HMS Culloden counted 5 Spanish ships, but as time passed the British counted more and more and realized that they were nearly outnumbered 2 to 1. Admiral Jervis nonetheless decided to engage the Spanish. After realizing what was going on, the smaller Spanish division turned and attempted to join up with the main one. They were now sailing almost against the wind. The main Spanish division continued on the same course. At 10:30, the Spanish main division turned north after realizing that the British would get in between them and the rest of their fleet, but 2 Spanish ships did manage to get across to the smaller division. At 11 o'clock, Jervis ordered that the British fleet form one line with Victory at its centre. He also ordered that the fleet engage the enemy. The British also turned north to chase the Spanish main division. The British exchanged fire with the smaller division, who were now cut off from the main one and still not in line formation. In a weird maneuver, the captain of the Spanish first-rate, Príncipe de Asturias, piloted his ship very close to HMS Victory and nearly collided with her. Before that happened though, the ship turned away and received 2 raking broadsides from Victory, badly damaging it and nearly knocking it out of action. Apart from this, the casualties on both sides as a result of this skirmish were light, and the division turned to the north to rejoin the main group that way. Further to the west, HMS Culloden was in the lead of the British line and was chasing after the main division. The only action taking place now was between the British line and the Spanish ship Oriente, although the ships were too far apart to do any considerable damage to each other. At 1 o'clock, Nelson realized that the British line was too slow to intercept the Spanish, and saw that it would be much faster to leave the line and go at them directly. By doing this though, he would be disobeying an order, and he guessed that Jervis had realized the same, and was about to order his rearguard to turn out of line. If Nelson was wrong, his career would have ended with a court-martial. Fortunately for Nelson, only 5 minutes had passed between him ordering Captain Miller to take the ship out of the line, and Admiral Jervis sending a signal that allowed it. At around this same time, the front half of the main division again turned to the east, to try and join up with the other division that way. The rest of it continued going north. Nelson's ship soon passed between Diadem and Excellent. By 1:30, HMS Captain was under fire from 6 Spanish ships, 4 of which were first-rates. The ship took a severe battering. Other British ships had followed Nelson's lead and were on their way to reinforce him. By now, HMS Culloden had come to support Nelson, and the crew made quick repairs to HMS Captain. The Spanish main division had once again turned and were now fleeing from the British. The ships that were at the front of the fleet an hour ago were now at the rear. As more and more British ships joined the fight, the Spanish ships at the rear began to take considerable damage, in particular the San Nicolas and the San Isidro, the 2 ships closest to the Spanish flagship. To the south, the smaller division turned to shadow the British fleet, who were now in full pursuit of the main division, with only HMS Britannia engaging the smaller one. She was exchanging fire with Príncipe de Asturias. HMS Excellent engaged Salvatore del Mundo, and then moved on to the San Isidro, which was a more convenient target as her mast had been very badly damaged and she was barely moving. The captain of the San Isidro understood the situation his ship was in and surrendered it at 10 minutes to 3. Excellent and Diadem then re-engaged Salvatore del Mundo, and seeing that HMS Victory was nearing as well, the ship surrendered a few minutes later. Nelson's ship, HMS Captain, was at this stage too damaged to participate in the fight. He saw, however, that the San Nicholas was also badly damaged, and asked his captain to put the ship alongside her to attempt to board her. After the ships were next to each other, Nelson ordered his crew to board the enemy ship. After a few minutes of fighting, they were able to take control of her. Her dying captain surrendered the ship to Nelson. During this time, the San Jose, a much larger Spanish ship, had somehow got itself entangled with the San Nicholas, possibly because its rudder had been blown away. Nelson sensed an opportunity to capture another ship. He ordered more men to come from HMS Captain, and at 20 minutes past 3, with a cry of Westminster Abbey or Glorious Victory, Nelson personally led the boarding party onto the San Jose. The ship surrendered almost immediately, and Nelson received the captain's sword as a sign of surrender. Nelson had captured 2 ships within half an hour. Nelson's maneuver was very unusual, as no British crew had ever captured one ship by boarding it from another captured ship. After the battle, it became known as Nelson's patent bridge for boarding first-rates, and he became quite popular as a result of it. The British had now captured 4 of the 6 ships that initially opened fire on Nelson, and were looking to capture a 5th. The massive Spanish ship Santissima Trinidad was in the process of surrendering to the British when 2 Spanish third-rates came to her aid and allowed her to escape. This happened around 4 o'clock. By now the Spanish fleet was in full retreat, and the smaller division covered the retreat of some of the damaged ships. The Spanish made for Cadiz, their initial destination. The British understood that the battle was over and decided to consolidate their prizes rather than pursue the Spanish. There were some skirmishes between the retreating Spanish and Britannia and Orion, but this soon ended. The British won an important victory, and Nelson had played a key part of it. The casualties suffered by both sides were relatively low compared to other battles of the era. The British lost 73 sailors and had 227 sailors wounded. The Spanish lost considerably more, at 430 killed and 856 wounded. The British captured 4 Spanish ships, 2 of which were first-rates. They also captured approximately 3,000 Spanish prisoners. After the battle, Admiral Jervis became an earl in recognition of his victory. In addition to receiving a knighthood, Nelson was promoted from Commodore to Rear Admiral, although this had nothing to do with the battle, as he was simply the most senior captain in the queue, and someone more senior than him had either retired or died. Britain's naval fortune turned around in 1797. Victory against Spain had boosted British morale, and later that year, British Admiral Adam Duncan won a fantastic victory at Camperdown against the Dutch, capturing 9 ships of the line and handing control of the North Sea to Britain. In the Atlantic, the victory and reinforcements received from England allowed Admiral Jervis to blockade Cadiz, and the Spanish fleet remained trapped in the city until Britain and Spain signed the peace treaty in 1802. Perhaps most significantly, the Battle of Cape St. Vincent pushed Horatio Nelson's career further. Admiral Jervis saw Nelson's potential and eventually gave him his own squadron to command. That, however, is a story for another video.